Well, I'm hoping that's working. All right. Let me just move this out of the way. Little challenge to start with, but we got
It
it.
says recording now, so
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone, beautiful, sensitive souls, and welcome to Surviving to Thriving, where we address how to move from struggle and just surviving in a world that's too big, too loud, too noisy, just too much, to a place of calm and actually thriving as highly sensing people. I am your host and sensory coach, Tammy Goen, and I'm so glad to have you here as always. And this month, we're talking about our needs and strengths and leadership in the workplace. And today, I'm so excited to have a very special guest with us today to talk about neurodiversity and inclusion in the workspace or the work environment. So today we have Sidney Elaine Butler. Thank you so much for being here. I will introduce her here. Sidney is an HR professional, a founder and speaker, and I'm going to let her talk more about this later, but DEIA HR consultant, it's a mouthful, and Accessibility Creates her business, a DEIB facilitator, and again, I'll have her go into that because I don't know a thing about it. So it's Sidney's understanding that their professional purpose must be to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to be successful, regardless of barriers in their way, and that they must, as a professional, remove these barriers. It's a big job. Sidney conducts training and consulting for other companies on how to be more accessible and inclusive from a human approach and how to recruit and retain more diverse individuals through the lens of intersectionality and human resources, as well as other areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in an authentic manner at the company that they founded called Accessible Creates. I love that name, due to understanding the barriers that exist within the workplace for diverse individuals. You don't do much. Okay, so, well, to start with, I mean, I'd like you to talk about what neurodiversity is, but if you wouldn't mind just spending a couple minutes talking about all of that background that you have with all of those, acronyms, all of the HR space stuff, and then how you came to this place, and then, specifically, what is neurodiversity?
Yeah, so kind of some context. So growing up, I had a speech impediment. I worked on my tippy toes. I had all these different challenges. And I was actually diagnosed with autism at a very young age, at the age of 6. But I didn't know what that meant. I just knew I had challenges. And when I've been supported by my family and by my teachers, I would thrive. And then, I also had to have speech therapy. And so sometimes teachers are like, well, you have to stay in class. You can't go to speech therapy. You have to focus on the material. But it's like, but then I couldn't. I would not go nonverbal sometimes and non-speaking, or it wouldn't speak up. And so I needed that speech therapy and able to have those tools and to feel more comfortable in my own skin. And so growing up, I thought I was going to actually be an environmentalist. I always want to change the world at a high level. I always say that. And so, I thought I was going to be an environmentalist, kind of deep into the sciences. That's what I liked in school. But I didn't, and then I went to high school and I didn't have the grades in math. I was, having great difficulties with math, and I took a business class, and I fell in love with business. I was like, this is so interesting. There's a lot wrong with business that I could see. I was like, I liked business, but I'm also like, there's a lot that needs to be changed in the business world. And so then I went to school, to college, university for human resources. Again, while going to school, I worked in a recreational setting, helping kids, teens, and adults with disabilities that are also neurodivergent. And I was like, I want to make a niche for myself of accessibility, diversity, equity, inclusion within the HR space, because there's not really much of that. Looking at school, just reading about the recruitment process and all these different things, there were so many barriers. And so also in my own workplace, in the recreational setting, I saw how my coworkers and my supervisors treated me when I needed accommodation versus how they treated our participants. And so all these little things, make up why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that I graduated actually from my university program in 2020. And you can imagine how difficult it was to get a job. The market is still bad right now, but it was even worse then. And I realized, I have this opportunity to kind of branch out and do my own thing and start my own business to be able to do the work I'm really passionate about doing. And so on your point about what is neurodiversity, so neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in different ways, in many different ways. And there's not one right way of thinking, learning, behaving, and it should be seen as differences and not deficits. I think a lot of people still think it's a deficit or it's a, but it's just a different way of thinking and navigating the world around you.
Right. And I would think that with that background and knowledge of HR in terms of
Mhm,
human resource
mhm.
uh, lens of
Yes.
business would be, I mean, do you find that that's the place to start with in a
Mhm.
business if you're wanting people to just see things in a little different way, or if maybe an employee is having a challenge and they want to address something, that would be the place to start is in the HR department?
I think so, because especially if you even like the candidates, that's the first side a person gets to the company is the HR. I know in America, like recruiting and HR is kind of different sometimes, but in Canada it's very overlapped. But even then, HR, they help the company, they help the employees, and really understanding the overall objectives of the company, and leads to productivity. And when you help people, when they feel more supported, when they feel like they can do their whole selves at work, they can bring, they feel more supported. It increases productivity and increases morale. And these are all HR topics and relevancies.
Right. And so, my show is focused on high sensitivity, which is
Hmm.
definitely under that umbrella of
Hmm.
neurodiversity. So can you just mention a few things that people might not be aware of that would be in that realm as well, outside of high sensitivity? What other things would be considered,
Yeah, I,
neurodiverse?
I, there's so many types of neurodiversity, and I think a lot of people, when they think of neurodiversity, think of autism and ADHD. Those are the most common ones that people think of. And I think mental health conditions, like trauma, OCD, bipolar disorder, PTSD, those are all under the neurodiversity umbrella as well, which can make someone more high sensing, for example. And there's also epilepsy, learning disabilities, which include dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and all these different things. People, it's so much bigger than what we think.
Right. And it makes me think of even things like misophonia, which you're probably
Hmm.
familiar with, but which is very, very high sensitivity specific to sounds and hearing.
Hmm.
And it's not on the radar much at all. Very few people hear about it, but sometimes that comes up when people are learning about high sensitivity and they say, oh, well,
Hmm.
I've got this sound thing, but then they realize, oh, I have sensitivity in other areas as
Hmm.
well. But
And I
that's
think
the
too,
primary.
like PTSD, you could have heightened senses with the hearing, and
Mhm.
with autism as well, and all these different things that they interweave with each other.
Right. Yeah, and I remember talking with someone on a networking call recently who was working with just a person I think that he'd connected with. He was a
Hmm.
fairly young man, it sounded like, but he had all of these hopes and dreams that he wanted to,
Hmm.
come to reality, but he felt limited by the fact that he was on the spectrum, the
Hmm.
autism spectrum, and he didn't feel like he was going to be recognized. And what this person that I was talking with said, that he said, well, how does that place that you are in, that you're experiencing
Hmm.
on this spectrum, what does that bring in a positive way to your life? What
Hmm.
are the things that you have that other people might not? And he went, just on and on and on about all of the things
Hmm.
that he just listed all
Hmm.
kinds of different things. And and then they talked about how that could be a focus. And so he realized,
Hmm.
like, oh, I could create a whole business helping people who are on the spectrum to
Hmm.
realize their
Hmm.
strengths and get them
Hmm.
out there, because he hadn't put that together as a potential, work
Yeah.
direction, because
Hmm.
he just felt that limitation like you were talking about to start with. So I love that idea of recognizing that there are so many ways of looking at it, but then stepping back to say, well, okay, so instead of it being a deficit, it is, you can say, just a difference, not a deficit,
Hmm.
but it tends to be, going forward, uh, all of these other opportunities that can open up, because there are also these unique benefits. So it sounds like you would consider yourself neurodivergent as well, but do you want to talk about that? And if so,
Yeah,
what it's like for you?
it's, I think a lot of times people have this perception of what it's supposed to look like. Or a lot of people are like, oh, a lot of people think it's like a young, especially with autism. Oh, it's a 5-year-old boy that has trouble paying attention, and it's so much bigger than that. Everyone, like it's a spectrum, and really understand that it's going to impact people differently. It's going to impact people differently on the day. Sometimes I have good days and bad days. I also have other mental health conditions that impact how I show up in the world. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to hide away and not leave my bed. Other days, I'm like, I gotta go on a show today. I'm so excited, and so just being patient with each other, and we have to learn how to be patient with ourselves, because I think sometimes there's the way it's portrayed in media and the way representation and all these different things impacts how we view how we show up in the world. And so neurodivergent or not. And so I think especially being neurodivergent, and so just being mindful that, we're all on different journeys, and that we, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if we were in a place where every time someone said, oh, I experienced life this way,
Mhm.
and instead of going, oh, okay, well, that's,
Mhm.
automatic, like a deficit or something, oh, we have to work around that or something, that there's this view of, oh, so what's that like? And what is, what amazing
Mhm.
things does that bring? Just having that opportunity to
Or
have
it's like, even like,
curiosity.
what can and when I talk about, I'm like, how, okay, you're struggling. Okay, how can I support you so you can, show your talents and your gifts and your skills to the best of your ability?
Right. And maybe even sometimes helping people to see that there are inherent strengths there,
Hmm.
and especially in a society where it seems like a deficit, and that's the
Hmm.
message that we're getting all the time. I remember when I learned about high sensitivity, for me it was that kind of aha, like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm not weird or different or needing to be fixed. This is how I'm
Yeah.
wired, and look at all these amazing things that I
Hmm.
wasn't even aware of as being connected with that,
Hmm.
because the stuff that's working, people don't necessarily bring up and talk about, and so we don't make that direct connection, but we make those connections of everything, all the limitations,
Hmm.
and where it's not working, and that tends to be the focus. So like in the workplace, then specifically,
Hmm.
what are some key factors of, both what that looks like, but
Hmm.
also how to support? So, which is,
Hmm.
sounds like your basic role is, how do you
Yeah.
get these, businesses to recognize the importance of identifying and supporting, and then how do they do
Hmm.
that?
Yeah, but I think there's so many articles right now about supporting neurodiversity in the workplace, and they're really trying to quantify it. Like increasing innovation, increasing productivity, and it does do these things. But when people are supported, like I mentioned before. But it comes back down to the human level. People if they want to work, they should be able to work. Working in a team, bringing different insights. Bringing different lived experiences. We all think differently, neurodivergent or not, and so sometimes people that just need a little bit more support. What does it look like? From a manager standpoint, do you have to check in with them daily to see if they're on target, or they feel okay with the work they're doing in the organization? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? And having a system in place for this person to be successful in their day-to-day tasks and operations.
So really being proactive and saying, oh, okay, so if I do things in a certain way, I
Mhm.
can really support this person, and then they can thrive,
Yes.
versus kind of just sitting back and letting it kind of unfold and expecting things to just magically fall into place.
Mhm.
Right. So what would be some of the things, as a, from a manager
Mhm.
standpoint, or someone who's, has a business with employees, and they say, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, I want to increase my awareness and, be more inclusive, but I have no idea where to start. What are some suggestions you
Yeah,
have
I think
for those folks?
there's some articles out there that, like, even understanding it's like, okay, how does it increase innovation? Ideally, you want to again be more human in your approach, but for the business case, because look at these articles, it's like, okay, yeah, we know we need to support more people, and understanding that, what does it look like on the day-to-day level? I think, a lot of things people are still looking at the high level, the overall business, the big profits, the revenues, but it's like, look at the day-to-day. What does it look like day in and day out?
And does it help to have, say, like an outline of, reminders of, oh, okay, so I mean, it seems like a
Mm.
manager would want to do this for every single employee, to be honest,
Mhm.
or divergent or not.
Yeah, it's like,
You know,
yeah, it's like
what are the
it
things that
trickles down.
I need to be aware of for this particular person, what will help them thrive, what are the things that are going to get in the way, and have that understanding, from the beginning. And like I said, I think it would be great for every single person, but I don't know that people take the time for that or
I
have the
think
time for that.
Yeah, and like in the onboarding process, that needs to completely be revamped. There's so many things wrong with the onboarding process, but I won't get into that. But just understanding in the onboarding process, okay, what supports do you need from us? Again, this can translate to any employee, and really understanding, okay, what can we do to best support you? What do you need from me on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? Having that checklist to see, and check in, having, scheduled time to check in with the employee, that, making sure they're on the right task and on the right, and they feel comfortable in what they're doing and what's asked of them.
And I would think one of the barriers or challenges in working with folks to increase their awareness and understanding is those things that they're not thinking about, the assumptions. And
Yes.
so, helping them be aware of where those automatic messages are, that aren't helpful because they're just not thinking in that direction. So maybe spurring, that conversation of, oh, these are some things to look for, or to ask about, or to be curious about. Okay, so if this is this person's experience, where, how do I find out what they're best at, what they will really shine at if I do things in the right way, and being able to ask themselves, at the beginning at least, and ongoing, of course, but how can that look? And I don't have that background, so I need to ask a lot of questions, right? How does
Yeah,
this
I think like you said, I think it ultimately does come down to questions, having that conversation, being transparent that, hey, I'm learning, can you and that you're learning with the employee, and you really understanding that's like, you're gonna make mistakes, you're only human, and being, again, that transparency piece, that I'm learning alongside you. If I do something wrong, call me out, or let's have a conversation about it. And really, I think a lot of times managers and HR and business owners, they all think they have to have all the answers. The employees appreciate more when you don't have all the answers. It shows that you're human, because we're all human at the end of the day, and that you're willing to learn and willing to make mistakes and be able to learn from them.
Right. Excellent. So as an employee, or even, a solopreneur who's engaging with different groups or situations, what's something that we can, if we are in that place of saying, okay, well, I'm neurodivergent in whatever this way is, high sensitivity or something else, but I want to, one, be in the right job, and two, get the support that I need. What are some things that the employee, the person who is experiencing this themselves, can be aware of, and some steps to take to make sure that they have the right job and that it's set up correctly?
Yeah, I think, really researching, okay, what work do you want to do, and understanding yourself, which is easier said than done, but it takes a long time. Doing self-reflection, it's like, if you've been in a job for a while, you're like, okay, I don't know if I still like it, and doing that self-reflection piece, okay, why don't I like it anymore? What would I like better? What are my long-term goals? And creating those long-term goals and those short-term goals, and be able to check in with yourself and be like, okay, is this what I want? Is this the trajectory of my path that I want for my life? And then also, making sure that, you don't have to necessarily disclose, but, being like, I need the support, or like, having coffee chats with people in the organization, what is the team like? Sometimes, like on LinkedIn, people just not reply because we're also busy, but at least trying to reach out and having those coffee chats. And if they don't reply, it's not necessarily an indicator that, this won't be a good work environment, but you want to have those conversations. Look up on Glassdoor and all these things that have these resources that say how the employee culture is, and how the support is, and ideally get an understanding of how the company works in the industry.
And I'm thinking in terms of, some of the clients that I've had, and them dealing with their HR departments or their managers or whatever, is there, considering your background with HR and understanding how all that works, is there a certain way that you would recommend for folks to address, the first person to go to in that department, or maybe if there's just one person in that department, then obviously that's pretty obvious. But what are the steps to making sure that they can talk with someone and feel heard and not, a lot of times people will feel like, well, I don't want someone to be upset with me or think I'm like this, squeaky wheel, pain in the butt or whatever. And so they hold back on discussing what their needs are and getting them met. So do you have a recommendation for how to take that step and have it go smoothly so that they're heard?
Yeah, I think even talking to managers or HR, if we're talking about performance, and saying if I need help, I need support with this to increase my performance or maintain my performance, and understanding that if you don't have these supports, your performance is going to be lower. If you have these supports, you'll be so much better and your performance be maintained or even higher. And so just really having that conversation, it's like, I want to be a high performer. I want to do well in my job. I care about this job. I care about, my career. I care about this position. I want to be able to do well, but I need X, Y, and Z to be able to do so.
Right. I love that. Because again, the assumptions can really get us stuck in so many different ways, whether it's any kind of relationship, any kind of business situation. So if our managers have certain assumptions and they don't check things out, they don't ask, they're never going to know. As employees or as people who are needing that support, if we assume that everyone else knows what those needs are, but they're just not following through with them, or that they should somehow be able to figure it out without specificity, then you're going to be in that place just to continue where you are and not getting what you need. So recognizing that, okay, so if I'm working with someone who's not as aware as I am because I'm in it, I have to remember that they're going by certain assumptions and I can't, go by just all of my assumptions of what I should know, or, oh, this seems so obvious, I wouldn't have to say this. So I would say, on both sides, people being very clear about what the experience is. And I think as a manager, that's one of the greatest questions, what is your experience with this? Because I come from a different place. So help me understand that, but also recognizing that is where people are coming from. So if we're needing that support, that we need to be very clear and detailed about, this is what my experience is like, not painting it as, I have this label or I have this deficit or whatever, and this is what I need to fix it, but saying, hey, this is what my experience is like. And then this is how I can really shine. And ultimately, it's the bottom line, right? It's like increase my productivity. These are the ways that allow me to be amazing, for the company, but we need to have that dialogue, that conversation so that it makes sense for everybody. Yeah, that's great. It's really great to know that there are people out there who are actively doing this work in terms of, because I will run into people quite often these days who will say, oh yeah, business really needs to be better at
X, Y, and Z.
These things of, whether it's neurodiversity or inclusion or whatever term they're using. And there seems to be a shift in terms of helping employees with that umbrella of wellness that seems to be picking up. And then now this, the term neurodivergent is more on the radar, but again, without much background or awareness or understanding, it's just like,
what is that?
Something, right? Exactly. So yeah, hopefully that's the trend, is people getting to that point of saying, oh, I need to know more about this, so that then we can make the right changes instead of just hearing, oh, I'm supposed to focus on diversity and inclusion and that kind of stuff. So this is what I think it would look like. I'm just going to do a couple things and then hope that works. But having people that can actually guide and say, okay, this is how this works. These are
I started my business. I just celebrated my 2-year anniversary on August 31st. And when I started, I was like, let's talk about neurodiversity, but no one was really talking about it. And then it's like kind of like the year after, people started taking traction and talking about neurodiversity. And I just like, it was kind of surreal, because I was like, it's picking up momentum. And I felt good about that. But then it's like a lot of times it's still buzzwords. And I think diversity, they use it mostly as buzzwords for marketing, but you really understanding, okay, what do you want from your company? What kind of teams do you want? What kind of departments do you want? What kind of people do you want in your company, to be able to thrive your company and have them thrive within your company?
Right. Yeah, and recognizing the benefits side of things, and how the diversity in general, like having all kinds of different people in the business that can do all these different things that they're so good at, instead of everyone being just the same and you know, not wanting to do those things or not being good at them, but having to do them. But if, you know, if there are people that shine in those areas, why not have as much diversity as you can? So everything
and play to the and to play to their strengths. You know, everyone has different strengths, so why not play to them?
Exactly. That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, and that I know part of that work is getting that word out there continually of inclusion, neurodiversity. What does that mean? Getting it, you know, more and more on the radar, which, you know, a lot of people are doing that with high sensitivity, and some I'm jumping on board with all of those things too, so that someday we get to that point where everything is just recognized as, oh, we are all different in all these different ways. And so the beauty is we can say, where does each person shine, and maximize all of that, instead of feeling like anyone has to like fit into a little box.
Exactly.
So yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here talking about this very important topic. And it's always good to have everyone, all of you that are tuning in, to join me each week. And as always, I'd love to chat with you directly. You can just find me on LinkedIn. I'm, well, LinkedIn too, but Linktree has all of my information. And it's easiest to just find me there with Tammy Goen. And then if you want to connect with Sidney, you can also go to Linktree with the name just Sidney Elaine Butler, the whole name. You have that on your screen. Perfect. And their contact email is accessiblecreates@gmail.com. So I have that in the show notes though, so people can just find it right there and click away. So good to have you here. I really appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing, and I wish you the most success you know, possible in your endeavors and your job, your business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
Okay, well, I'll see you all next time.